The bones in that Mexican cave were not supposed to exist, because everything we thought we knew about the first people in the Americas said they could not be there, not that old, not in that place, not like this. Before we go further, do one thing for me. Send this video to someone who loves ancient mysteries, because by the end of this, you will both be asking questions historians have been afraid to answer out loud. For hundreds of years, we told ourselves a simple story about the Maya, brilliant builders, star watchers, a civilization that rose out of the jungle in Mexico and Central America, built giant pyramids, invented one of the most accurate calendars in human history, and then mysteriously vanished. That was the story in textbooks. That was the story in museums. That was the story most of us grew up believing. But here's the strange part. The deeper scientists dig, literally and scientifically, the more that simple story starts to fall apart. Because new ancient DNA evidence is telling us something the old story never prepared us for. The Maya may not have appeared the way we thought. Their ancestors may not have come from where we assumed. And the timeline story most of us grew up believing. But here is the strange part. The deeper scientists dig, literally and scientifically, the more that simple story starts to fall apart. Because new ancient DNA evidence is telling us something the old story never prepared us for. The Maya may not have appeared the way we thought. Their ancestors may not have come from where we assumed. And the timeline we built our entire understanding on maybe missing pieces so big, they change the whole picture. This is not just about pottery and pyramids anymore. This is about identity, about where an entire people actually came from, and about a mystery hiding inside human bones for thousands of years, waiting for science to finally catch up and listen. Let's start with the version most of us learned. For a long time, the common belief was straightforward. Humans crossed into the Americas from Asia using a land bridge called Beringia during the last Ice Age. Now, these early travelers moved south over thousands of years. Some of their descendants eventually settled in the region we now call the Yucatan Peninsula, parts of Guatemala, Belize, and Honduras. Over centuries, they developed farming. They built villages. Villages became cities. Cities became one of the most advanced civilizations of the ancient world. That civilization was the Maya. It's a clean story, a tidy timeline, point A to point B to point C. Humans arrive, humans settle, humans build. And for decades, this was treated almost like settled fact. Museums displayed it as the origin story. Documentaries repeated it. Even many textbooks presented it with confidence, as if there were no real gaps. But here's something important to understand about history. A story being repeated often does not mean it is complete. Sometimes it just means no one has challenged it yet. And ancient DNA has finally started challenging it. Let's pause on something for a second, because this is where the mystery really begins to open up. Human bones do not just hold a skeleton, they hold information. Deep inside old bones and teeth, especially in a tiny dense part near the ear called the petrous bone, DNA can survive for thousands of years, sometimes in surprisingly good condition, especially in certain climates. For a long time, scientists could not read this ancient genetic material clearly. The tools were not advanced enough. But over the past couple of decades, DNA sequencing technology has improved dramatically. What used to be nearly impossible is now something researchers can actually attempt carefully and with growing confidence. So scientists began doing something remarkable. They started extracting and analyzing ancient DNA from skeletal remains connected to early inhabitants of Mexico and Central America, including sites linked to the ancestors of the Maya region. And what they found did not simply confirm the old story, it complicated it. Some of the ancient genetic patterns did not match a clean, single wave of migration. Instead, the evidence pointed towards something messier and far more interesting. Multiple population movements, different groups arriving in different waves over long spans of time. Some genetic signatures suggesting deeper, more complex ancestral connections than the simple one-path narrative allowed for. In other words, the simple story of one group walking down from the north and becoming the Maya was too simple. Now here's where it gets even more emotional, because this is not just about population movement charts. This is about identity. Imagine believing your ancestors arrived in one clear, singular story. Then imagine discovering that the truth was layered, blended, shaped by multiple ancient populations, mixing together over thousands of years. That changes more than a historical detail. That changes how an entire descendant community might understand where they come from. For many Maya descendants living today across Mexico, Guatemala, Belize, and beyond, this is not a distant academic debate. This is about their own roots, their own bloodline, their own story of belonging to this land. And that's worth sitting with for a moment. Now let's go back to the mystery, because there's another twist waiting. If you comment the word roots right now, I'll know. You're the kind of person who needs to see where this goes next, because it gets stranger. One of the biggest surprises to come from ancient DNA studies in this region involves timing. Some genetic evidence tied to early Central American populations suggests human presence in the Americas that stretches back further and involves more complexity than the traditional single migration story accounted for. Some researchers believe there is evidence pointing to earlier arrivals than once assumed. Others argue the picture involves not just one wave from Asia, but potential additional genetic contributions and population interactions across a much longer and more complicated timeline. To be clear, this is still an active area of research. Scientists do not fully agree on every detail. Some findings are debated, some interpretations are still being tested and refined. This is real science in progress, not a finished textbook chapter. But that uncertainty is exactly what makes it fascinating. Because it means the story of where the Maya truly came from is still being written right now through careful lab work, patient researchers, and tiny fragments of ancient bone. Let's talk about why this matters beyond just curiosity. For centuries, origin stories about indigenous peoples across the Americas were often written by outsiders. European colonizers, and later Western historians, frequently constructed narratives about who these ancient peoples were, where they came from, and what their achievements meant, often without deeply consulting the descendant communities themselves. Ancient DNA research offers something different. It offers a chance to hear directly from the biological evidence left behind by real people. Later, Western historians frequently constructed narratives about who these ancient peoples were, where they came from, and what their achievements meant, often without deeply consulting the descendant communities themselves. Ancient DNA research offers something different. It offers a chance to hear directly from the biological evidence left behind by real people who lived, breathed, and built extraordinary civilizations. It's not filtered through old assumptions. It's written into the very cells of the ancestors themselves. That's part of why this new wave of genetic research feels so powerful. It's not just correcting old textbooks. It's giving descendant communities a more accurate, evidence-based connection to their own deep past. Now, let's dig into another layer of this mystery, because the Maya civilization itself holds pieces that still confuse researchers. The Maya built massive stone cities in the middle of dense jungle. Structures like the pyramids at Tikal in modern-day Guatemala rise dramatically above the tree line. Some Maya cities had populations in the tens of thousands. They built sophisticated water systems. They created a written language using intricate hieroglyphs. They developed a calendar system so precise that it still amazes astronomers today. For a long time, people assumed a civilization this advanced must have developed in a fairly straightforward, isolated way, evolving gradually from simple farming villages into complex city-states. Advanced must have developed in a fairly straightforward, isolated way, evolving gradually from simple farming villages into complex city-states. But archaeological and genetic evidence increasingly suggests something more dynamic. Trade networks that stretched far beyond the immediate region, cultural exchange with other Mesoamerican civilizations, like the Olmec, who came before, and later interactions with groups like the Aztec, genetic and cultural blending across different populations over centuries. This means Maya identity itself may have never been one single uniform thing. It may have always been something layered, formed through contact, exchange, migration, and adaptation. That idea alone reshapes how we should think. Migration and adaptation. That idea alone reshapes how we should think about ancient civilizations in general. We often imagine ancient peoples as isolated and unchanging until outsiders arrived, but the truth, especially now revealed through DNA, tells a different story. Human history has almost always been about movement, mixing, and connection, far earlier and far more often than we assumed. Let's bring this back to something deeply human for a moment. Somewhere in Central America, thousands of years ago, real people were living real lives. They were falling in love, raising children, worrying about the harvest, watching the stars, and trying to make sense of time itself. They had no idea that centuries later, tiny fragments of their bones would end up in a laboratory, analyzed by scientists trying to understand exactly who they were. There is something incredibly moving about that. These weren't just data points, they were people. Their DNA is not just a scientific tool, it's a message, quietly waiting across thousands of years, finally being heard. And that message is telling us the truth might be far richer and far more complex than the simplified version we were taught. If you're starting to feel like history keeps hiding bigger truths behind simple stories, you're not wrong. And that feeling is exactly why this story deserves your full attention right now. Let's go deeper into the tension inside the scientific community, because not everyone agrees on how to interpret this data, and that disagreement itself is part of the story. Some researchers caution against overstating early findings. Ancient DNA studies, especially in tropical regions like the Yucatan, face real challenges. Heat and humidity can degrade genetic material faster than in colder climates, making some ancient samples harder to analyze reliably. This means every new discovery needs careful verification, and scientists must be cautious about jumping to conclusions too quickly. Other researchers argue that even with these challenges, the patterns emerging from multiple independent studies are too consistent to ignore. They believe the evidence increasingly points toward a Maya ancestry story shaped by multiple migrations and population interactions, not a single simple path. This tension between scientific caution and emerging patterns is completely normal in real research. It is not a weakness of science. It is exactly how real science works. Ideas are tested, challenged, retested, and slowly refined, sometimes over many years, before a clearer picture forms. So instead of a neat, finished answer, we are left with something more honest, an unfolding mystery, a puzzle still being solved. And honestly, isn't that more exciting than a story that was already fully known? Let's shift now to another surprising thread in this story, something that connects ancient genetics to a very human, modern question. Who gets to define history? For a long time, indigenous voices from Maya descendant communities were often left out of major historical narratives about their own ancestors. Decisions about how to interpret ancient sites, artifacts, and remains were frequently made by outside institutions. But that dynamic has been shifting. More researchers today emphasize the importance of collaborating directly with indigenous communities, respecting cultural and ethical considerations around ancestral remains, and involving descendant voices in how discoveries are shared and understood. This matters deeply because ancient DNA research does not exist in a vacuum. It touches real living communities with real cultural and spiritual connections to their ancestors. Handling this kind of research responsibly means recognizing that these are not just specimens, they are someone's ancestors. Some Maya descendant communities today continue to speak their ancestral languages, practice traditional customs, and maintain a deep connection to their heritage, even after centuries of colonization, discrimination, and immense hardship. For them, discovering more accurate details about ancestral origins is not just interesting information. It's a reclaiming of identity that history often tried to erase. That's worth remembering every time we talk about ancient DNA as if it's just a scientific headline. Behind every genetic marker is a living legacy, still breathing today. If any part of this is making you see history differently already, imagine what's still ahead, because the deepest twist in this story is still coming. Let's return to the mystery of the Maya collapse, because this connects to our theme in a surprising way. Most people have heard some version of this. Around the 9th century, many major Maya cities in the southern lowlands were abandoned. Massive stone temples were left behind. Populations dropped dramatically in some regions. For a long time, this was framed almost like the Maya simply vanished. But here's something crucial to understand. The Maya did not disappear. Millions of Maya descendants live today across Mexico, Guatemala, Belize, Honduras, and beyond. Many continue speaking Mayan languages. Many maintain traditions passed down for generations. What actually happened during that period is still debated among historians and archaeologists. Some evidence points to prolonged drought and environmental stress. Some points to political instability, warfare between city-states, or overpopulation straining resources. Many researchers now believe it was likely a combination of multiple factors, not one single cause. Ancient DNA research adds another layer to this puzzle. Some studies focused on later Maya populations. After this period of decline, showed genetic continuity connecting them to earlier populations, but also reveal ongoing interaction, migration, and adaptation. This supports the idea that Maya history was never a straight line. It was a long, complex, evolving story, filled with resilience even through hardship. Think about that for a moment. A civilization that faced dramatic upheaval, lost major cities, endured immense challenges, and still its people survived, adapted, and continued their story for over 1,000 more years, all the way to today. That is not a story of a lost civilization. That is a story of an enduring people. Let's bring another important thread into this now, something that connects the ancient past directly to right now, to this very moment you're watching this video. Genetic research techniques are still advancing rapidly. Every year, scientists develop more precise tools to extract and analyze ancient DNA, even from remains previously thought too degraded to study. This means the story we're telling right now, today, is not the final version. Future discoveries could reveal even more detail about early migration patterns into the Yucatan region. They could clarify exactly how different ancient populations interacted and blended over time. They could refine our understanding of exactly when key population shifts happened, and how they shaped early Maya society. In other words, the mystery is still open, and that's an incredible thing to sit, how different ancient populations interacted and blended over time. They could refine our understanding of exactly when key population shifts happened, and how they shaped early Maya society. In other words, the mystery is still open. And that's an incredible thing to sit with. We are living during a time when ancient human history, once thought fully written, is actively being rewritten through science happening in real time. If you find that thought exciting, imagine with. We are living during a time when ancient human history, once thought fully written, is actively being rewritten through science happening in real time. If you find that thought exciting, imagine being a young researcher today, someone who might spend their entire career slowly uncovering pieces of this exact puzzle. Somewhere out there, a student is probably studying ancient bones and DNA samples right now, unknowingly working toward the next major revision to everything we think we understand about the Maya. History is not just something that already happened. Sometimes it is something still being discovered. Let's pull back for a moment and look at the bigger picture, because this story is bigger than just one civilization. The Maya are often taught as this isolated, singular case, almost like a unique chapter separate from the rest of world history. But what ancient DNA research is revealing here mirrors patterns scientists are finding all over the world. In Europe, ancient DNA has revealed unexpected waves of migration, completely reshaping our understanding of who early Europeans really were. In Asia, similar genetic studies are uncovering surprising population movements far more complex than old textbook maps suggested. Across the Americas, researchers are finding that indigenous history involves far more movement, blending, and complexity than previously assumed. This is a pattern worth noticing. Almost everywhere, scientists apply modern DNA analysis to ancient human remains. The simple stories we were taught start becoming more complicated, more layered, and honestly, more human. Because that's what real human history actually looks like. Messy, interconnected, full of movement and mixing and adaptation. Not a clean straight line, but something closer to a web, stretching across continents and thousands of years. The Maya story is just one thread in that much larger web. But it's a thread that touches millions of people alive today, and that makes it deeply personal. Now, let's talk about something that ties all of this together in a way that might stay with you long after this video. Ends. Every human alive today carries an ancient story written into their DNA. Most of us will never know the details of that story. We'll never know exactly which ancient populations mixed together to create our specific genetic background, or what journeys our distant ancestors took thousands of years ago. But for Maya descendant communities today, ancient DNA research is slowly opening a door into exactly that kind of knowledge. It's giving them access to a more accurate, evidence-based understanding of where they truly come from, beyond myths, beyond colonial narratives, beyond oversimplified textbook summaries, and in a strange, beautiful way, this connects to something universal. All of us come from somewhere complicated. All of us are the result of countless generations of movement, mixing, survival, and adaptation. The Maya story, uncovered piece by piece through ancient bones and modern science, is really just a powerful, detailed example of a truth that applies to every single human being on this planet. We are not simple stories. We never were. So let's come back to where we started. We were taught the Maya appeared through one clear migration, developed in isolation, built incredible cities, and then mysteriously disappeared. That was the simple story. But ancient DNA is telling us something far more complex and far more human. Multiple waves of ancient populations, deep genetic connections stretching back further than once assumed. A civilization shaped through contact, exchange, and blending, not isolation. A collapse that was not disappearance, but transformation and survival. A living legacy continuing today through millions of Maya descendants who never vanished at all. The truth is, we are still uncovering exactly who the Maya were, and honestly, exactly who we all are. Because every time science digs a little deeper into ancient DNA, it doesn't just rewrite history, it reminds us how connected human beings have always been. Across time, across land, across bloodlines, we are only now beginning to fully understand. Somewhere in a quiet laboratory right now, a tiny fragment of ancient bone is sitting under a microscope, waiting to reveal its next secret. And somewhere in Guatemala, in Belize, in Mexico, a Maya descendant is living their life today, carrying inside them a story that stretches back further than any of us fully understand yet. That story is still being written, not just in ancient bones, but in the questions we keep asking and the truths we're brave enough to keep uncovering. And maybe that's the real lesson hiding inside this entire mystery. History is never really finished. It's only ever as complete as our courage to keep digging deeper.